Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei, because today we're going to be doing a very lengthy thing, so sit back, relax, and get whatever you need to get ready for however long this video is going to be, because today we're going to be reviewing the Minecraft event game draft that the Pookies did. Now you might be very confused, what is a Minecraft event game draft? Who are the Pookies? Here you go. This is the results, and we're going to review the decision making that they had for this little fun activity that they put together. I'm going to assume, based on the results, that it was a draft where you at most could pick 9 games, because everybody has 9 games, and I'm fairly sure there are many options left, so that's just my assumption. And the participants were Ubhi, Kaelan, Ant, Stu, Toph, Chaos, and Shane. I actually forgot that Stu was in this, so I'll add I'll add Stu in a little bit. But here is the VOD. We're gonna be taking notes of every decision that's being made and being extremely critical of every single thing that follows the decision making that we see on screen. I have Antfrost's VOD up on the left. I have this up on the right. We're gonna be sitting here trying to skim through this VOD on the left. It's not gonna be the whole 11 hours, right? Don't worry. It's only gonna be like an hour or something worth of content, I think, or maybe like almost 2. But we're going to just sit through this and analyze the decision making, because I have pretty different opinions to an extent from what these guys have. These guys are mostly people who are more in favor of PvP, more in favor of mechanical skill. I'm not really, for the most part. So it'll be interesting to see what the decision making looks like. We're going to do it muted because we're not going to hear the reasoning behind these choices, but regardless, also I'll give my take on this result at the end as well, because I have been asked for my opinions, so I'll share them. Let's first start with how the draft opens. Ubhi makes his first choice, I think, or Ubhi is the first to make a choice, and I think he ends up picking... oh, hold on. There's apparently some games that are not being considered at all. I should probably take that into consideration, but whatever. Ubhi, I think, takes the first pick of Temple Lockout. I don't know when this pick is decided, because these people love yapping, but I'm fairly sure he takes Temple Lockout first, which, Ant, please, when do you guys talk? I beg. I see, so suddenly we've got a lot on the board, whatever. I'm trying to see when things happen. Maybe Antfrost VOD is not the best VOD to look at to start, but I am fairly sure that the opening pick was Ubhi picking Temple Lockout, which I think is fair. If you are a PvP enjoyer, Temple Lockout is one of the best games you can get across the event scene, which is very valid. I also know that Kaelan picked Dodge Bolt. Oh, here we have something. Hold on. Ant, go back! I saw something on the screen happen. I'm fairly sure Kaelan picked Dodge Bolt. Ant picked Sense of Time. So that's what we got, right? So Kaelan picks Dodge Bolt. Kind of a questionable pick for the second overall. The reason for this is, right, undoubtedly, Dodge Bolt's best finale in the Minecraft event scene. 100%. Best Minecraft event scene finale we have across all of the events. Debatably, you know, for blockwars Chaos, maybe you could say, specifically for blockwars Chaos, rock, paper, scissors is better, but generally speaking, Dodge Bolt is the best across the scene. So this is valid, this makes sense, in terms of picking that as a finale. The problem is, I don't think Dodge Bolt's going to be contested early on, because you want some star power in your actual game roster. The thing with a finale is only a small portion of the roster gets to play it, so if that's your best game, or your preferred pick, or your best showing, that's going to only really appeal and apply to a small portion of your roster. However, Ant makes the pick that I am fairly in agreement with. SOT is usually considered the best event game, so that makes sense. Then Stu picks Chalice Chase, which I think is somewhere over here. Yeah, Chalice Chase, which I think is pretty fair. Again, keep in mind that these guys are a bit more mechanically and high skill oriented. These are going to be kind of the lanes that they would pick games from. Obviously, in my a very personal and definitely not humble opinion, I'd say like a Blitz Hunt could be in one of the earlier votes, though I would argue that that may not be a highly contested game in terms of the early round picks. So maybe getting a good MCC game in your roster could be nice, or something along those lines. Toph actually does that. He picks Ace Race, which is very valid. Chaos, I'm not sure what he picks, but we'll see. I don't remember specifically what he went for first. Oh, he goes for Meltdown, which is a good pick. Meltdown is a very valid first round pick for sure. And then Shane, I think, gets to pick 2 here, if I remember correctly, because it is a snake draft, I think, in which I'm fairly sure he picks Sky Battle in round 1, if I remember correctly. And I don't know what his second pick is, but I'm fairly sure his first is Sky Battle if we just let it play out for a little bit. Hello? Hello? Is it hello? Is he picking? Oh, and now his Ant's in Minecraft. Okay. Maybe I missed it. Did I? Oh, I skipped way too far. Okay, so this is not the best way to do it, clearly, from the way things are going here. Skip over here. Oh, Sky Battle and Order Up. That's what he picked. Okay, so Sky Battle first, and then Order Up was number 2, which I think is fair. You do want a pretty good team game in your roster. I do think there is a lot of material left. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of material available to pick from. I think a Railroad Rush is a good one. I think, yep. Railroad Rush is a good one. in a good, with a good rotation, I think or what's it called, Gridrunner's pick would also be valid, but I can understand from Shane's standpoint, he's played the entirety of Season 3 MCC, and there it was a little bit overplayed. Hyperdrive, second pick, is questionable in my opinion. It makes sense from a Kaos21a standpoint, but Hyperdrive would not be in my top list personally. I know a lot of people like Hyperdrive. Hyperdrive to me is kind of just a similar boat to Get to the Other Side, without the punching. Where, well, no, sorry, not that. Hyperdrive is kind of the middle ground between To Get to the Other Side and what's it called, Voidbound. Where, as much as I like Elytra Movement, and I think Elytra Movement is good, Hyperdrive is a game where if you make a mistake, you're gonna be very heavily punished from it. Like one mistake and it's over, which kind of sucks. I think I personally really don't like that type of gameplay, but that comes with a higher comp event. Then furthermore, the what's it called? The To Get to the Other Side aspect is just, it is like a, you know, one course, just go do the course, which is fine, right? It's good. It can be good, but personally, that doesn't result in a top, what would this be, top 10 game, essentially, in terms of the pickings here. I definitely think there's some other gameplay on the hand here that could be a little bit better. I'm curious to see what Toph's second round pick is, though, because there's a lot left on the board that is very, very high value. So I am curious. I'm very curious to see what results in this. Also, I do recall that Toph's final roster ends up being very team-oriented. I assume he picks a team game next, in which it could be a Trials or a Hades or whatever, if I had to guess, considering it is Toph. However, they also are all big yappers, so I guess we're going to have to wait and see what the pick actually ends up being. Oh, it is Trials of Fire. Trials of Fire is what's being picked here, and that makes sense from a Toph standpoint. I think Trials of Fire is pretty good. The problem with Trials is kind of similar to Gridrunners, but a little bit less, because Trials is a lot more replayable. Trials, I think, needs more puzzles, which I think they're going to probably end up doing, right, when it comes to post-break Pandoras Box. Or I don't know if PB does seasons. I would probably consider this a PB Season 3, maybe. But makes sense that they would probably add a lot of puzzles or new trials. For me, it's just, once you've played a trial once or twice, the excitement's gone. It's not bad, but the excitement's gone, and you probably want something different. So yeah, curious to see what Stu picks though in his next pick. He already has a movement game with Chalice, so I'm curious. Oh, he goes for Extraction, which is a very, very good pick. Kind of surprised that wasn't picked earlier, but I also know that to an extent there is some not anti-blockwars, but some slight bias against blockwars in this group as well, which is totally fine. Of course, that's totally fine. Minor Mania pick from Ant is very good. I think that makes a lot of sense. Ant's roster so far. Oh, Build Mart being picked by Kaelan. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. I think Minor Mania it makes sense. From an Antfrost standpoint, he's making a roster that currently, so far, is relatively friendly to different types of skill sets. So far, in terms of the other picks, I would say that it's a little bit more mechanical leaning, although obviously Minor Mania is a PvP game and SOT does require knowledge. This is so far a pretty friendly roster. However, Kaelan's picks are even more friendly to a, let's say, variety roster or something, right? Which, keep in mind, that is not the goal for these picks. I'm just saying, like, if you want your best event for you personally, that's cool, but if you want other people to also think your event is the best, you want it to be accessible to as many types of players as possible, with obviously at a cost of that what's it called, lowering the overall hype potentially behind it. Build Mart pick is interesting. I'm fairly sure from what I heard from speaking to a lot of these guys on my walk when they made the decisions, is that Kaelan just went for picking games he wants to play, which is totally fair. Honestly, if you want to play Build Mart, that's totally valid. Build Mart has qualities to it. It is definitely overhated, but I definitely wouldn't agree with it being a top 15 game. I don't know. Anyways, next pick is Ubhi, who actually gets to pick 2 games here, which is a very big one. I think if I was Ubhi here, now I don't really know perfectly what Ubhi's preferred type of gameplay is. If I was Ubhi here and I wanted to round out my roster, I'd definitely go for a movement game with like a Trailblazers potentially, and then maybe a team game like a Railroad Rush. I could see a Rocket Spleef being a pretty good pick here as well. Factory Frenzy could be pretty good. Multi-Spleef could be pretty good. There's definitely some stuff. Cosmic Construction I think could be good. There's a lot. Runner's Rampage could be good as well. There's a lot of picks that are very, very good here. So I'm curious to see what Ubhi actually goes for. I don't recall. I think he actually did go for, I want to say Factory Frenzy, but I'm not super confident in that call. Does he end up picking quickly or no? Hello? Are we picking or no? Okay, Factory Frenzy is on the board. So Factory Frenzy being picked from Mayhem. Very, very good pick. Temple and Factory is a monstrous first 2 games. Crazy to think that with the freedom of choices, Ubhi getting obviously first round pick is huge, but getting his second round pick with that much value, it's kind of crazy compared to some of the other choices. Although if I looked at it objectively, right, Ant wouldn't really pick Factory when he already has SOT. He wants to make sure that he has good variety in terms of his roster, so he went for a PvP game when he already had a team or miscellaneous type of game mode. Stu hates building games, so that would make sense. Toph went for the PB teamwork game. I do think Trials would be a pretty hot commodity for the rest. I don't know how Chaos feels about Mayhem or gameplay like that, but I would also be surprised if Chaos didn't have a PB game in his first 2 picks overall. And then Shane, I know, isn't really a build game fan, so I guess it makes sense that Factory was left alive, but that does mean that Ubhi starts off really, really strong with these picks. I know that everybody here falls off at some point with the picks that they make. I know everybody here makes some absolute fumble choices. And I'm curious to see what that results in. The absolute best thing Ubhi can do right now is pick a movement game. And I pray he picks, whether it's a racing game or a Trailblazers or something like that, it is absolutely his best next play. I'm curious to see what he pulls through with here, unless he has a really, really high quality game in mind that doesn't hit the movement requirement, right? But I'm very curious to see what that ends up being. Hello? Let's see what the pick is. Can we skip through? See it? Sky High! That is a choice for sure. Okay. Sky High is like good-ish. It definitely has some qualities to it. Definitely very, very questionable choice when you have so much left to make an amazing roster and your third pick is Sky High. Like said, a racing game like Race or Runner's Rampage would be amazing to pick in this case. That literally, you have a top 3 that is like undoubtedly a top 3. Not top 3 games of all time, but like compared to the rest, that is a insanely strong top 3 to have on your hands. Trailblazers, like mentioned as well, is a very popular game, especially in terms of what people want to see. For sure as well. Blitz Hunt is on the board, which I understand someone like Ubhi may not be the biggest fan of, because it is a more content-oriented game and doesn't really have as much skill requirement as some of the other games. But still, it's on the board, which is crazy. There's MCC games on the board. No MCC games picked by Ubhi just yet, which is ridiculous in my opinion. As much as MCC obviously, you know, has some stinkers in its roster, or stinkers more so being some mid in its roster here and there, there is a lot of value to pick from. And keep in mind also, by the way, Chamber Trial, I'm pretty sure Chamber Trials and Clicks games and maybe even Mania were not added until after this, so these games are not in are not in consideration. I know that they said that golf would be also very high in demand if they had the chance to pick it. So very solid pick from Kaelan there, just taking Trailblazers. Very redeemable pick there for sure. I do think that Build Mart is gonna hurt a little bit in terms of this overall pick, because a lot of people don't like it, and especially the crowd that they're probably trying to appeal to. Kaelan is suffering kind of a lot with having a Build Mart pick. I think there's going to be a lot of anti-Build Mart fellas in the audience, because I do know the audience had some level of involvement. Rocket Split Rush being picked by Ant here, which I think makes sense. That is good. It's a movement game. It's a miscellaneous game. It helps. I think that's just overall a good pick. Then let's see what Stu ends up picking. Stu picks Blitz Hunt, which makes sense. Blitz Hunt's finally off the map. Stu having both, I mean, probably the two best. Well, the top 3 blockwars games have been picked. The top 4, debatably even with Trailblazers, right, have been picked so far, which makes sense. They've just been spread across like butter, which is crazy. Let's see what gets picked furthermore, though. I'm going to try to skip through a little bit to maybe see some more action. Battle Box being picked by Toph. This makes sense. He doesn't have PvP yet. Battle Box is a pretty safe PvP game. Extraction would obviously be the more favorable round-robin PvP game pick overall. What other PvP is in the roster that he could have picked that is debatably better? I don't really think there is much left, which makes sense with this crowd, that the PvP games that are really good are going to be picked already. Obviously Blockwars Battle probably wouldn't be that high up. MCC has what left? SG, meh. Battle Box is a good pick, yeah, for sure. PPSG is whatever. Then what else we got? Arena is not super great. Guardians of the Chamber is alright, but Battle Box is better for sure. I don't know about any of the other events, so I don't know what other games they could have missed out on, because clearly there's something. I don't know what archery and all them is. Is that from oh, it's from KST, so not surprised that we don't have those games being picked as well. Let me see what we get next. Come on, I want some activity. Grid Runners is being picked by Chaos. Surprising, honestly. I did not expect Kaos21a to pick Grid Runners, but he did. I definitely do think that Shane would have went for that. Maybe not, actually. I know Shane doesn't dislike Grid Runners. I just think that having another team game would be maybe a little bit much, though it is value. It is a lot of value. Insane to me that Ace Race obviously is off the board, but no other race game has been picked yet. Ridiculous, by the way. I do think I'm jinxing myself, because Shane, I think, does end up picking Race here. Yep, he went for Mayhem, Spleef, and Race. Quite a lot of value that he's gaining from that one. What is it called? Sky Spleef, and then Blockwars Race, which, like mentioned, yeah, good picks. The fact that Runner's Rampage is on the board is very interesting, especially for some of the people that don't have much movement in their roster just yet, which is mainly Ubhi, and we'll see, I guess. Anyways, I know Chaos ends up going for a fumble in terms of some of his picks. I think that may be coming up very soon, if I had to guess. Let's see what he ends up picking, though. He goes for PBSG, which is alright. I mean, it is Kaos21a. That makes sense. I do think there's some value to be had from that. It depends on what type of roster you're trying to appeal to. If you want to go for a PvP game, that is probably one of the best you have on the board. So that's valid. That is not at all crazy, in my opinion. Then Toph is up next, and he goes for Dungeon Dash, which I think is valid. That makes sense. Dungeon Dash is a game that I think, similar to like a Lunge and even to a Tomb Titans, had a not great first experience for most people, but definitely has had some chance to redeem itself over time. Maybe not as much Lunge, but Tomb Titans for sure. I don't know if I said Trailblazer or Tomb Titans. Even Trailblazer was like that, but mostly Tomb Titans. I do think that Dungeon Dash has a lot of potential to evolve a little bit further, even improve a little bit more. I would say that in my Invitational, it was a lot better, for me at least personally, than it was in the main event beforehand, the week before or whatever, or the 2 weeks before, I don't remember. I'm curious to see how it'll expand and evolve going further, because I do think it has a lot of potential. But let's see what else is being picked here. So up next is Stu, who goes for Colosseum, which I know was pointed out to be a bit of a questionable pick, because you already have Extraction, which is kind of the same game. That is definitely a interesting decision to be made. Now, if we're looking at the other finales, let's say Stu just wanted to lock in a solid finale, I definitely would say that Shockwave depends on the player, depends on the person. You could argue could be higher up. If you think it's not, that's totally fine. I would say that Hungry Hoglins would make a little bit more sense to pick over, what's it called? Over Colosseum. I do think Rock, Paper, Scissors in this type of format has a lot less value, although obviously with the bias of Blockwars Chaos being one of the more popular events, I could see people go for that one a little bit more over others. Is Mayhem's finale on the board or not? I don't think it is, but I do think that one would have a decent bit of value as well. And then KST is in there. I don't know if KST has a finale, but I think maybe that could have some value to it. So I guess if you want a finale, Colosseum is a good pick. It just sucks that you have both Extraction and Colosseum in the same roster, because hypothetically, if this were to be an actual event, getting a last game Extraction straight into Colosseum would definitely have a bit of fatigue with it, which is definitely a bit rough. Let's see how the board develops furthermore. Maybe I could just skip through, honestly, a little bit. Let me just skip here and see what we got on the board. Assuming that Ant actually looks at the board for once, please. Okay, we have the board on our hands here. So, Ant's next pick was Parkour Tag. That's fine. Chalice already got picked, yeah. Blitz Hunt already got picked. If you want a format or like a movement, not round robin movement, but like, I mean, I guess it is round robin movement to an extent, right? Including Blitz Hunt. That would be the only remaining pick, really, for the most part. Parkour Tag is overhated, again, similar to Build Mart, overhated game for sure. Is there other movement on the table that is potentially better? I mean, Ant's movement is definitely lacking in parkour, besides Parkour Tag, of course. Runner's Rampage was still on the board. That one's crazy to still be laying around, in my opinion. I think that one definitely could be picked pretty confidently. And I don't think there's much of a debate to be had that would be a throw or a fumble in any sort. I think that would have made a lot of sense. Though we continue upwards, and Kaelan figures out an absolute crazy left gem on the board, being Multi-Spleef, which is good. I do think Multi-Spleef is slightly overrated, if I'm being honest, and I'll explain why. It's mainly because of the repetitiveness that Mayhem had near the end of its life cycle before it went on an indefinite break. Because Multi-Spleef, obviously, as much as it is a really good game, it was the same experience pretty much every single time. And when you play Mayhem once every 3 or 4 weeks, and it's the same game, and it's like the main game people were paying attention to, and then later, obviously, Factory Frenzy comes in, but it's still one of the main games that you pay attention to, I do think it loses a little bit of its value. Similar to how if Blitz Hunt was in rotation, or was being played weekly, and the rooms barely changed, it would lose a lot of its value. So that one's definitely a curious choice. Then, Ubhi picks Jumping Mad 2, which I don't understand fully when Runner's Rampage is on the board. I mean, I guess Jumping Mad 2, I mean, it's not a bad game. It is just parkour, which I personally think is a little boring. But okay, that's a choice for sure. That is definitely a choice. It's yep, that is a choice. Which he follows up with Runner's Rampage. I just saw that to my bed. So Runner's Rampage, is being attached to Jumping Mad 2. Curious picks here. So, I guess to cover your movements, that is solid. What other options would you have if you were to, not take Jumping Mat 2? You would have Parkour Warrior, which you'd probably pick Jumping Mat 2 over that because of the scoring, potentially, right? Though I would argue that Jumping Mat scoring is not great either. I know that they mentioned scoring a bunch, but meh. Then movement-wise, what do you have left? You have Speedrun, which, no. Voidbound, nah. Sprint, meh. It's not even really movement. Checkpoint Champion, no. Elytra Race is just not as good as Hyperdrive, but honestly, maybe you could pick that one. Honestly, it's not like it's significantly worse than Hyperdrive. It's just almost the exact same game. Rapid Racers, honestly, is a pretty good high-value pick on the board. You could pick that, but though you have Runner's Rampage, so that's fair to not pick that. And then I don't know what else is left, so I guess if you really want movement, you could pick that. But then again, I look at Ubhi's roster, and I'm like, the amount of mechanical skill needed to compete in this roster feels like it's so high. You could even include like a variety game in terms of a hole in the wall, or even a Railroad Rush, or an OG Rocket Spleef. Is that on the board? Is OG Rocket Spleef on the board? No, OG Parkour Warrior is... No, OG Rocket Spleef is not on the board. That sucks. That would have been such a freebie. So, I guess it makes sense to an extent. I know that they don't really like Spleef, so that's fair. Party, honestly, could be a pretty decent pick. From their perspective, I understand some of the other games not being picked as much. I think even a Gauntlet could be up there. But sure. Kaelan goes for Battle, which... I mean... Yeah, I guess. I mean, at this point, if you want a PvP game... Again, my take on Battle is it's not a bad game. It just doesn't fit in Blockwars. So, assuming that this isn't within the Blockwars environment and you're just grabbing Battle and playing it solo or separately with whatever roster you have in mind, I think it's honestly not a bad pick. I think it's got value to it. And follows up, though, with an Oppenslimer pick, which I think is valid. Ant's roster right now is very miscellaneous. It has a PvP game, it has a movement game, but the movement game is like it's movement, but when you think of a movement game, Parkour Tag is not the first one you think of. You think of a racing game or a parkour game or whatever, right? Which Parkour Tag has parkour, but you know what I mean. And Minor Mania is a good PvP pick. Then he has SOT, which is like a team or just dungeon crawler game. I recently had the debate that SOT, Tomb Titans, Dungeon Dash should all be separated from the quote-unquote team game category and get their own category, because I don't really think these games should be considered to be proper team games. Team games just feels like the term people give to games that are team-oriented to an extent and aren't PvP or movement, right? Which I don't know if I fully agree. What was I saying again? Oh yeah, so Ant's roster, and then Rocket Spleef and Oppenslimer are miscellaneous, though. Obviously, Oppenslimer is like miscellaneous with kind of not really PvP, and then Rocket Spleef is or is miscellaneous with movement. So I guess probably a fine pick. I don't really know what you would do as an alternative pick. I think a party is, or like a party-esque game, whether it's Gauntlet 2 or Party. It has a lot of value in this board because it hits so many different marks. You can get your ranged PvP from a party game. You can get your movement with a beep test. You can get etc. Right? There's plenty of stuff you can get from a party. Even Splat. gets you Oppenslimer to an extent, right? Obviously, Oppenslimer is a little bit more advanced and a little bit more expanded on, or a lot more expanded on even. But you hit the same mark to an extent. So honestly, I would probably pick Party over that. I will admit, blockwars, I'm biased, but I feel like that's not a crazy take. I feel like that's not a crazy take at all. Though I do think Oppenslimer is a good game, so I don't think it's a bad pick at all. I just think there's better potential picks to be had here. Cosmic Construction also is on the board still, by the way, I think, right? Or no, is it not? It is. Insane. A construction pick from Greninja is something interesting. I definitely understand where people got the memo of. I know Stu is one of the people that was mentioned for like a strong start but a major drop off. I know there's going to be some more questionable choices being made from Greninja here. I also know Chaos was labeled as a strong start and a major drop off. I'm curious to see how that develops, but a construction pick is interesting. Definitely interesting. Okay, so Toph goes for Shockwave, which I think is fair. At this point, you want to get a finale, and Shockwave is a good finale. I just think that you need to separate it from Dodgebolt comparison. That's literally the only argument that is mainly to be had against Shockwave is that, okay, not only argument, but the main argument that is usually being given against Shockwave is that compared to Dodgebolt it is not better, which totally fine, right? Okay, so Chaos goes for Gauntlet 2. I already mentioned there's a lot of value in that. I think that's fair. Shane goes for Hungry Hoglin, which I think is good for a finale pick. That makes sense. Oh, oops, wrong tier. I do think Shane goes for a party pick next, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly sure that is his next pick. Which again, because Cosmic Construction's on the board, but I know Shane doesn't really like building games like that. So makes sense that he wouldn't go for that. Let me skip ahead a little bit further, so we see a bit more of the picks at the same time. Party was indeed picked. Again, similar to Gauntlet 2, the reason it's a valuable pick is because you hit a lot of different types of game modes at the same time. Chaos goes for Guardians of the Chamber, which I know was talked about to be a somewhat questionable pick. I don't agree with that. I think it's actually a pretty good pick here. The only argument you could have is that there is enough PvP potentially. Though, no, actually. Yeah, no, you already have Meltdown, you already have SG. I think you're fine to not pick another PvP game, especially when, again, there is a Cosmic Construction on the board. Or even Zabin Cap honestly has a good amount of value to it. There's Railroad Rush, there's Hole in the Wall, there's plenty of stuff on the table. But I guess like Guardians of the Chamber, it's not a bad pick. It's just there's better picks in my opinion. Is kind of the conclusion that we get to there. So yeah, Toph's recent one was Shockwave. Let me skip ahead a little bit further so we see more of the picks. Toph went for Haunted Havoc, which I don't think that is a good pick. When you have Trials of Fire, when you have Dungeon Dash, you don't really want Haunted Havoc, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong to claim that. But I don't really like that pick. But that is not the worst pick that I'm seeing here, because Stu went for To Get to the Other Side, which, like, movement representation, movement coverage, I guess is fine, but like, really? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's questionable for sure. Ant goes for also a questionable pick, survival games. I guess he could have that PvP rep. I think that PvP rep is fine. Your other picks are what? Lunge. You don't have a finale. You can, actually, hold the phone. You don't have a finale. Bridges is right there. I know Bridges has flaws to it, but the only flaws that were mainly applicable to Bridges is that once Blockwars' roster started to expand in the more variety and lower comp direction, it no longer fits the event. This does not have those context issues. The Bridges pick was right there. Is it on the board, right? Is it? Surely. Yeah, Bridges is right there. I mean, I guess it's a finale, so like, but still, dude, Bridges. You pick MCC SG and Bridges was right there. I do think if you wanted to pick a non-finale PvP game, it's probably not a bad pick. I mean, what else is even on the board? Tunnel block? Nah. Capture point? No. Lunge? Too early to call, really. I feel like that's a fair one to not pick. Arena, I do think would be a little bit higher in ranking, though I understand from Antfrost standpoint, he only played this game when it was really laggy. So, sure. Fair enough. I don't know what other games are even... Oh, I guess they're over here. In terms of like raw PvP, you don't really have much left. Sky Skirmish is... it's you could pick it. It'd be a choice for sure. I do think a Zap and Cap would be a better pick here. I mean, again, there's some value left on the board that I don't understand is being left on the board. The only reason some of these picks may be valuable... Oh, hold on. May be valid to an extent is the argument of you want some representation. Kaelan goes for bingo but fast. That makes sense, I think. He has Build Mart as a team game. He doesn't have another build or a team-oriented game. Bingo, I do think, qualifies to be a pretty good pick there. Turf Wars, though, is what is being picked by Ubhi. Is Turf Wars on the board here? Or did Turf Wars get removed? I don't think Turf Wars is even on here anymore. So we don't have something to represent Turf Wars. Because this is blockwars Turf Wars, I think. At least, yeah, blockwars Turf Wars. We don't have an image for that. I'm just going to have to come up with something to put there. I'll just say Zone Control is going to be the placeholder. Because we don't have Turf Wars and this won't be in the draft anyways. So let's continue. Bridges is right there, though. I think Bridges is a better pick, generally speaking. I mean, I guess you have your closer ranged combat games already. Ballistic Bingo next is a choice. I mean, if you want Bingo rep, sure. But again, Cosmic Construction's on the board as a team-oriented game that I undoubtedly think is better. Railroad Rush is on the board, and I think undoubtedly that's better. I don't understand some of these picks. The later picks are the questionables. The early picks, I'm like, yeah, this is fair. There's validity to these picks. I think it makes sense. But, like, come on, man. Some of these later picks are something. Let's see what Kaelan ends up picking, though. Let's just skim through it a little bit. He goes for... Oh, no. He goes for Voidbound. You already have Trailblazers. I guess you don't have a race-oriented game. But Voidbound, I'm fairly sure the reasoning or the logic behind this was Voidbound has the room for improvement. But even then, Rapid Racers, I understand. The map was the same. But we're assuming that these games would be probably in their best shape going into this event. Rapid Racers is better, man. The Rapid Racers is 100% a better pick than a Voidbound, in my very humble opinion. I don't think it even comes close. I also know that there's going to be people screaming probably about Hades Havoc being on the board. Shane and I had the discussion of Hades Havoc in terms of replayability being probably a bit more mediocre than some people make it seem. Though I did just say that they would be in their best shape, in which Hades Havoc would probably be a pretty good pick. So I guess to each their own. Ant does go for Railroad Rush. It being left on the board for so long is something. So I think Ant gets a lot of value on his plate there. A lot of value on his plate here for sure. Let's skip through a little bit further, see what other picks are being made. Stu goes for Sky Zone, which, like, you do need PvP like that, probably. If you're Greninja and you make a Minecraft event, or you pick a Minecraft event, you need some melee PvP rep. But I don't know about Sky Zone. I don't know about Sky Zone. I even think a Sky Skirmish pick would potentially be better here. No. I think Sky Zone does get overhated to an extent. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm comparing it to Sky Skirmish. Definitely would pick Sky Zone over it. Yes, there's a lot of flaws with Sky Zone. A lot of things about Sky Zone were definitely not good. But it's definitely got some value. So I guess if you really want PvP, it's fine, because Toph does end up taking Sky Skirmish here, which, yeah, makes sense at this point. Toph's PvP right now is Battle Box, and that's it. Shockwave is a finale, so I don't really count that. So that makes sense. I'm not gonna pretend like that's a horrible pick. Then, oh, okay, wait, we skipped some chapters here. We skipped a lot of chapters here. Chaos picks Speedrun first, which, yeah, I'm fairly sure the consensus that we reached here is that Chaos had two better picks on the board at the time. He had the option to pick Runner's Rampage and went for something else, which he could have gotten Runner's Rampage at some point. I think he picked, was it PBSG that he picked at that time? I don't know. But, yeah, probably would have been, because that would have been 4th and then 5th. Yeah, so he picked SG instead of picking Runners over Speedrun, so that's probably fine. Shane goes for Hole in the Wall, which I think, crazy that that's still on the board at this point. Does follow it up with Parkour Warrior, which you'll know I'm biased against. I think it's fair to pick Parkour Warrior. I think there's some value to be had from the game. To be fair, if you want a parkour game, your other options are definitely a lot worse. So that's fair. That makes sense. Rapid Racer is still on the board, though. Which, I mean, Shane has Race, so that's actually fair. No, Parkour Warrior makes sense. Chaos goes for the Bridges finale. Again, kind of crazy that that's on the board still. Honestly, kind of crazy that that's on the board still. At least it was on the board still. Toph goes for Checkpoint Champion, which, considering we're in our 8th picks now, yeah, sure. Stu goes for Tomb Titans, which I think is alright. Tomb Titans also overhated game, 100% overhated. But yeah, I just think Stu's drop off here is a little bit too far to consider it higher than some of the other ones. Ant though goes for Disco Fever, which, let's see what else we have on the board. Do I agree with that? No. Cosmic Construction is right there. Why are we not picking that? Zap and Cap, honestly, even Task Tag, I'd say would be a more preferable pick, especially recently fixed Task Tag is a lot better, I think, than a Disco Fever pick. Overspleef, as much as it has flaws, has some amazing moments in it. Picking Disco over Overspleef is very questionable, in my opinion. I don't really agree with that at all. Move is on the board. Move has flaws, but like it's still a good game mode. Though in Ant's case, he has Parkour Tag. He no, he could have Move. I think Move would honestly not hurt to have. So, don't know how I feel about the Disco pick there. We are waiting on the Kaelan pick here to be Tunnel Block. Okay, Kaelan is throwing. Clearly, let's just move on. Let's just move on. I do think Ubhi gets to pick twice here to finish off his draft. I'm curious what his resulting picks are going to be overall, to see what Overspleef gets picked. I think is good. That's a good pick considering the lack of miscellaneous gameplay in Ubhi's roster. I do think that is a good pick to have. And then let's see what follows up. Elytra Race after that is all right. Actually, no, I don't disagree with that. That's fair. That's fair. That's a fair pick. I think that makes sense. Because he doesn't have Elytra rep yet. He does have a good amount of movement already. I guess Runner's Rampage has Elytra in it, but yeah. Zap and Cap now finally leaving the board in Kaelan's hands, which, yeah, it was about time. Ant picks next, which he ends off his draft with what? What do you end off with? Is it, there's no shot it ends off with rock, paper, scissors. That is quite a funny last pick if you do end up picking. That is hilarious. Wait, no. Oh, I put Tunnel Block in the wrong, sorry. Tunnel Block was in the wrong tab. Okay, so, yeah, so rock, paper, scissors ends up being picked by Antfrost here. It's a fun finale. It's definitely fun. I do think it would suck to like really be trying throughout an event and then lose to rock, paper, scissors, though. It's debatable that as much as it has RNG, you can control some of the results. Move leaves the board now in Stu's hands. Not a bad pick, honestly, in my opinion, at the end here. I think this makes sense. Toph finally takes Cosmic Construction. Though I would argue in Toph's hands, this is already a common opinion, it doesn't really serve the best purpose because you already have 3 other team-split, team-oriented games, but alas. What does Chaos end up picking here? I do think we're reaching the final 2 picks, which OG Build Mart enters the hands of Kaos21a. Okay, OG Build Mart, which honestly, maybe crazy take, good pick. I like it. I like that pick. I like that pick a good amount. And then Shane finishes us off here with what? What is your pick? You are kind of left with an empty hand at the end here, for the most part. Though I would say that there's still some picks you could make that are honestly not bad. He goes for capture point. Sky Spleef isn't really PvP. Sky Battle PvP, you are kind of lacking in the PvP department to an extent. Though Party does cover some of it, but I guess if you want PvP, that's fine. And I think that's the final result. I think we don't get many changes from here on out, right? I think that's it. I think that is the results that we get. Let's fact check. For the most part, obviously these are going to be in a bit of a weird order, but I'm fairly sure these are accurate. Now the chat ended up ranking these, which I think is what we're seeing here, actually, on the board here. I'm fairly sure this may be the rank. Actually, no, I'm wrong. The rank's definitely later. It gets ranked at some point. I think this may be the final result. Right. Oh, this is Ant's personal picks. Okay, cool. Because I was in VC at this point. So the chat ranked Kaelan's the worst. Then Stu's the worst. Then Chaos the worst. Then Shane. Then Toph. Then Ant. Then Ubhi. Here, I'll just let the gameplay in the meantime, so you have something to look at. If I'm looking at this roster, do I agree with that? I do think Kaelan does get a bit of a rough start, which hurts a lot. I do think there could be a bit of bias against Kaelan's board because of that. However, I also do think that overall he is kind of lacking in that the oomph department of his roster. I do think gameplay roster wise, there could be a little bit more, a bit left to desire. Then we look at Stu, who, like said, starts off really strong and then drops off quite a lot. I do think the move pick at the end kind of redeems it a little bit, but I do think that ends up being a pretty stinker of a draft at the end. Especially considering what was left on the table to an extent. There's definitely some stuff that could have slid in and saved his draft a lot. And then Chaos, I would say, why is Chaos so low? Gridrunners, I guess, has some bias against it. Chaos doesn't really have much star power. He has got Meltdown, and that is about it. Really, in my opinion, I do think Meltdown is just Chaos's only real big selling point for why his roster could be considered that good. So I guess we're entering Kaelan and Stu. I think are generally going to be considered the like bad or like not so great draft. I do think Chaos is the first draft where we're not going to say it's bad, it's just mid. So that's fair. I think Shane up next. Again, no real star power in his roster. Your selling points are like Sky Battle and Order Up. Race has a good amount of value to it. I mean, in my perfect opinion, I think up until the final 2 picks, I would say that Shane's draft was pretty good. Obviously, with the final 2 picks, I don't think Shane made a mistake with picking these games, necessarily speaking. I just think that with what was left there, the representation that Shane was looking for in terms of PvP and parkour, or more so the other way around, left him with some meh results. Though, again, like mentioned, Parkour Warrior was about the best option left at this point for movement or parkour specifically, and I think that Capture Point was kind of the only PvP game left besides like a lunge, which generally speaking, if you're trying to appeal to the crowd to an extent, is not a good pick at this current moment. So yeah, this makes sense. I do think Shane's roster has some value to it though. Then we see Toph. Toph's star power is Ace Race, and getting a last second Cosmic Construction pick is huge. I do agree with the sentiment of Toph has too many team split games in rotation where you'd probably be a little bit miserable playing the event and having to deal with all those team split games, especially if you were to have a team that isn't as good at those team split games. Assuming that you would have to play all of them. So I honestly would say that I'd probably say Shane's roster beats Toph's. I don't really understand the Toph over Shane pick here. I guess to an extent there's some stuff that... No, I guess it makes sense to an extent. Shane's low ends are lower than Toph's low ends, probably. Though I would say, like, let's do it comparatively. Like, Ace Race to Race, roughly even, though I'd say Ace Race recently is a bit better. Then Battle Box to Capture Point, Battle Box beats. That's what Toph would be winning in that department. Finale-wise, Shockwave to Hungry Hoglins, I would say Shockwave is slightly better, but I honestly could argue that those could be 50-50. Sky Skirmish to Sky Battle, Shane wins easily. Checkpoint Champion to Parkour Warrior, Shane wins easily. And then it's Trials Haunted Havoc, Dungeon Dash Cosmic Construction versus Order Up Sky Spleef, Hole in the Wall, and Party. Considering the variety in Shane's drafts, I would say Shane does end up beating that. I think Toph and Shane is very close. I'd honestly argue Shane's is a little bit better than Toph's. I would argue these are very, very close. I don't think there's a definitive distinguishment you can make between both of those. I do think I would say Shane's is a little bit better. Then we get to Ant versus Ubhi. Now, Ubhi has a lot of value on his roster. Temple is one of the best games. Factory is one of the best games. Runner's Rampage is sometimes one of the best games because of the map. But I honestly think that Ubhi has a decent amount of mid on his roster. I think he has some great star power, but he's got a decent amount of mid on his roster. Elytra Race is meh. Ballistic Bingo is meh. What's it called? Turf Wars is okay. Overspleef is alright. Jumping Mad's alright. Sky High is alright. So you've got 3 games that are really, really trying to steal the show, but the rest is very meh. Overall, at least. Which I don't know about that being the number one, but I guess we're going to have to value the rest. Ant's got SOT, which is a big, big player, of course. Minor Mania is good. Rocket Spleef is good. Parkour Tag is underrated, so pretty good. Oppenheimer's pretty alright. SG is not great. Railroad Rush is good. Disco Fever is not great. Rock Paper Scissors is nah. But I would say that Ant has 3 games that are not favorable, and Ubhi has 3 games that are very favorable. So it's a flip situation. I'd say Ant beats Ubhi any day, in my opinion. That is my take, though, because I'm a lower or not as much of a mechanical skill player, so that's probably where that take comes into play. But I definitely think I would pick Ant's roster over Ubhi's overall, generally speaking, in my opinion. Then Shane versus Ubhi. I do think that's where it probably ends, generally speaking. I would say that Shane has some games present that are pretty nice. I do think that, again, Ubhi has more games that I would be meh about than Shane does, but Ubhi has more very standout games than Shane, which does make it a little bit difficult to potentially favor Shane over Ubhi. I think this is probably fair overall. Though I could say this one's also fairly close. I do think that Ant is probably the winner overall. I do think Ubhi, Shane, and Toph are very close. Like, this could be interchangeable. I don't know if I'd say Toph could be the number one out of these, but I do think Ubhi and Shane could be pretty interchangeable. I think these would be fine in their respective spots. And I do think that the bottom 2 is pretty definitive, unfortunately, and that Chaos is in a pretty solid spot there too. So that's my take, my analysis of the Pookies Minecraft Event Games draft that we saw take place this weekend. Let me know your thoughts after the whole 55 minutes of yap. about this analysis. I'm sure that a lot of the opinions I share regarding macro events, and specifically this draft, may be unpopular because I'm sure from a viewer standpoint there are going to be games like PvP that you would enjoy a lot more than I would as a player. Though I think there's a good amount of validity to the criticism that I have given, obviously with bias involved. So anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.